Hello everyone and welcome back to our Scratch track. We are now on our 7th lesson and believe it or not, you are almost done with this course. So let's get right into it. What have we been covering so far? Well, if you remember at the beginning of this track, we started talking about what Scratch is and how to set up your environment. We started dealing with moving your characters and even having them do more complicated movements such as gliding or jumping. Then we started talking about coding terminology. We started learning about loops, which we covered, and seeing how things can be repeated several times. And we also covered variables and conditions in code and what those essentially do and how they can be used. And today we're going to talk about functions. Now, I know this may be a little fast-paced or a lot, so if you are struggling to keep up, make sure you slowly go through the videos and just really understand the content that I am teaching you guys. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and I will be glad to help you with anything you're struggling with. So, without further ado, let's start learning. So, let's talk about what functions are. Well, functions are something that's used in programming throughout so many different languages, and they essentially allow you to combine several steps of a code into a single statement. Now, this may not make sense at first, but like any video or any different concept, it will definitely be easier once I show you the visuals and how it looks in Scratch. So, you can define a function on the side, aside from your main script or code, and you can then call your function through your main script. And once a function is written, it can be used several times throughout the code. So functions essentially are written apart from your main script or your main code that you have, and they're simply called in the main code. But to see what actions actually occur through a function, you would have to look at where the function is defined. So let's see how functions work so we can get a better understanding of what they are. Well, a function can take in certain parameters as inputs. We won't be dealing with this just yet, but it's nice to know what you can do with functions later on. It also takes some sort of input, or it takes some sort of value. It manipulates and modifies the given data, and then it gives a different output. So essentially you feed it some information, it does some sort of manipulation with that, and it gives you an output depending on whatever modification you design the function to do. Now each function is given a name, and this name can be called throughout the main script for that function to be performed. And it has a designated purpose each time. And because it's written as a function separate from the main script, you can call it several times throughout the main script and essentially refer to it as many times as you would like. It's used when you want to perform a specific set of actions throughout your code, meaning that if you want something to happen several times, not in a loop, not one after another, but let's say you want your character to blink and then walk, blink again, and do a different action, let's say jump, and blink again. If you're going to have your sprite continue blinking, you may as well put that in a function and call it blink. And lastly, functions improve the efficiency of your code. All of these concepts I've been teaching you guys, yes, they can generally be done in some sort of way without using loops or variables or conditions or even functions. But all of these things come together and help you have your program have a better efficiency. In the long run, when you try to create programs, or if you do, it's going to be really important that the runtime and how efficient your code is really short, because the faster something is, the better. The faster it gives you the output, the better your program will run. So keep that in mind as we keep going through the course. Now, I said that functions can be used several times throughout your script, and you may be confusing this with loops. Loops will repeat actions based on given conditions, right one after another, whereas functions are written separately in a different script, and they're just called several times. You can do some sort of nested thing where you have a loop, and within the loop you call a function, but that is way too complicated for this course, and we're going to just stick to the basics. And functions are written separately, like I said. And if you're wondering what a function looks like in Scratch, well, I have an image right here of what it might look like. Obviously, it looks a little bit different now. Scratch has gone through some updates, some changes, but it gives you the gist of what a function will look like. In this particular function, there are parameters being passed through, the parameter or variables of text and time. And that is the name. It's the name of the function is called say and store text, and then a given text and a given time. Now, all the blocks that follow this are going to be a part of the function. So when in the script it says say and store text time, then it will go through the following set of actions and perform whatever modifications the function asks it to. So in this case, the function will take the text and the time given. It will say a blank text for a given amount. So let's say it says hello for 3 seconds. And then it's add text to say, which is a variable, but we don't have to get too much into this. Now, if you want to see how this would look overall in terms of not only writing the function, but combining it to your main script, here we have a small set of code. Here there are 2 functions, not 1, but 2. The first function is called first phrase. Now this plays a certain note for a certain number of beats. And the second phrase is another function that we have that plays the note, a certain note for 0.5 beats 4 times, and a different note for another 0.5 beats 4 times again. So you can see they also use loops and functions. And now the name of the functions are here, where after define, it says first phrase and second phrase. So these are the names that you will use when you're trying to add it to your code. Now, because you've created a function, Scratch will automatically create a new block for you that says the name of the function. So in this case, Scratch automatically created the first phrase and second phrase blocks. And so when the user wants to call a specific function, all they have to do is drag and drop the name of the function, in this case first or second phrase, under the main script. So when the green flag is clicked, here are 4 blocks that call the functions. In this case, it calls first phrase, then first phrase again, then it calls second phrase, and then it calls first phrase again. Now, again, these aren't directly related to the projects we've been working on, but it's easier to understand some concepts when you see it in different situations. However, if you would like to see how we're going to incorporate this into our game, continue watching and I'll take you guys through the steps of implementing functions in your Scratch game. Alright, so here's where we left off from our last video. Now, we have our game still functioning. If you were curious as to what it looks like, we can quickly just run that. Obviously, the ball comes at us and we jump. It gives us a point and we continue playing this way. And if we let the ball hit us, then no point is added. Currently, there aren't really any repercussions to hitting the ball, but we'll get to adding that later on. We'll even get to add some cool sound effects and just different elements to pull this whole thing together so that when you guys do create your Scratch game, that you guys can really tie everything together and make it look really unified. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing today. Well, we started off by talking about functions, and now we're going to learn how to incorporate them into our game. So let's start off here. What can we make into a function? And we can start off really easy. We're going to just start off by adding a add point function. So how do we create a function? Well, we go over to the little sidebar on the left and go down to My Blocks. So once you're here, this is where you can add a function. It's technically called a block in Scratch, but in regular coding terminology, it's referred to as a function. So you can choose to call it whatever you like. Just know that if you do end up taking more complicated courses, when they call it a function, that is what they're referring to. So we can add a block, and we're going to call this just add point. We do want to choose names that are directly relevant to whatever we're trying to create, just so it's easier to keep track throughout your code, what you're doing and where you're doing it. In the case that you find errors and you need to debug, it'll make this process a lot easier. So we're gonna add point. Here I just changed the name and typed it in. And then we don't want to add an input or label, and we're just going to click OK. So all I did is click make a block, change the name, and now I'm going to click OK. And so it creates our function header for us. Notice how it says define add point. It created a function almost title for us, and now the name of the function we chose, it's called add point. And now we really get to decide what we want to happen. Well, what's going to happen when you add point? Well, the score is going to increase by 1. So the score is going to change by 1. And now we're kind of just going to take this block right here that says change score by 1 and move it under add point. Now, you'll be a little bit confused as to why I'm doing this. I'll explain that to you in just a second. But now that we've moved it here, if we run our program, is this going to work? No, because we never called add point throughout our code just yet. We created the function, but it's never being used. It's not going to change anything. Now, if I click run, nothing will happen if the sprite successfully jumps over the wall. So how do we exactly call a function in Scratch? Well, if you notice over here, when I clicked create for my function, a new block popped up with the name of the function. It's called add point. So this, like any other puzzle piece that is given to you by Scratch, can be used in your code. So we can just drag this under here, and now our program should work. Essentially, all we did was replace the change score by 1 by adding a function, and it'll do the same thing that it did before. This won't improve the efficiency necessarily because it's not shortening the code by a significant amount because we're just calling it once. But if we did have a more complex program, this would definitely be helpful. Now, if you can see, I keep jumping and it increases the points, and if I don't jump, nothing's gonna happen. And yep, that's pretty much it. I mean, we created a function and we implemented the function. Although it doesn't make much of a difference to us, it's really just meant to help you guys understand how functions work. So we're going to keep playing around with this a little bit more. We'll add 2 more functions, and then, well, you guys will be done with functions for the time being. So what's the next function we want to add? Well, we're generally going to stick to movements now. We can put specific movements under a function, and there's really only one movement that the sprite is doing, and that is jumping. So we can create a jump function. So what we're going to do is click make a block, and we're going to type in jump, and OK. So we have our jump function created over here, and the new block is added right here. So I'm just going to drag this down here so it's easier for us to see. Now it says define jump. Now, where is our character jumping? And we're going to take those blocks where it is jumping and just put it under jump. Well, we can simply take a look at this code right here. This is when the space key is pressed, it's asking our sprite to glide up and glide back down. That sounds like a jumping motion. So we're going to take these 2 glide blocks and just move them under the jump function. So I'm going to separate this, drag this over here, and I'm going to drag this back to when space key is pressed. So now I have my jump function created, and is there anything I'm missing? Well, I need to implement the function. Now, this can often be something you forget to do, but it's really, really important because creating the function doesn't do anything, but calling the function is what actually tells your program, hey, make sure you do this. So you always have to make sure that not only do you create the function, but you call it in your code. So we're going to take this newly created jump block and put it right where the 2 glide blocks used to be. Notice in this case, it did shorten the code a little bit by taking out 1 block, but not too big of a difference. Obviously, by doing this, you're going to see like how functions can help in a very small scale. When you get to more complex coding, then you'll understand large-scale impact of it. So again, nothing we learn or nothing we do today is going to change the functionality of our code. It's just going to teach you how you can use functions to do the same things you've been doing it before and hopefully improve efficiency when you have more complicated code. So I can play it again, and first ball comes, I jumped over it, so I get a point, and the second ball comes and I choose not to jump and I don't get a point. And so everything is still intact. The code functions exactly the same as it did as the end of last week's video, but we're just going to play around with functions one more time. And so today we're actually not going to do anything with the clouds, but with the ball. Notice how when I clicked on the ball, all of these blocks went away. That's because the functions we created were specific to the sprite character or the cat. And that's because different objects in the game have different scripts or different codes. So when we created variables, if I go here, you can see all the variables, because when we made the variables, we made them in a way that all of the objects could have access to the values of the variables. But for functions, they are specific to an object. So the cat has its own functions, the ball has its own functions that you can create, and the cloud has its own functions that you can create. So what is the ball doing in the game? What's its purpose? Well, the ball's purpose is to move towards the cat as an obstacle for the cat to jump over. So we're just going to add a simple move function. We're going to click make a block, type in move, and click OK. And you can see the move function has been created, and so has this little move block. Now we want to see the part where the ball is actually being asked to move, and we want to isolate that part from the rest of the code. So the ball script is very short, and we can see easily where the ball is being told to move. Well, if we look over here, it says when green flag is clicked, go to this position and wait, so it's not doing any moving just yet. Then here we have a loop. It goes to a new position, it glides, and then it goes back to the original position, glides, and continues doing that. Now that is where the ball is moving towards the cat and going back and moving towards the cat and resetting again and again. So this part is a part that we want to move under the function. So we can take this whole loop, and this is based on opinion. If you wanted to just take the two pieces over here, put them under the move function, and put the move function within the loop, let's say like this. If we wanted to just take these two blocks, put them here, and put move over here, that would work too. It's really up to you what parts you want to include under the function and what parts you don't. In our case right now, it doesn't make a difference. Depending on the circumstances, it probably will make a difference, but in this case it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to show you guys the other way to show you easily what difference it can make in the length of the code. So I take this and I'm going to take the entire loop and I'm going to move it over under the move function. And now, are we done? Well, no. Like I've mentioned enough times already, we have to make sure that we call the function under the main script. So we're going to take this move block, put it under wait 2 seconds where the loop used to be, and now we have our newly created function and we have it called. So let's run this game one last time before we end, just to make sure everything works as it should. Now again, nothing is going to change from before. Ball comes at the cat jumps, cat gains a point. Ball comes at the cat jumps, the cat gains a point. Ball comes at the cat doesn't jump, no point is added. So the game functions exactly how it used to. The balls move towards the cat again and again. The clouds move, making it seem as the cat's moving, and the cat jumps when the spacebar is clicked. So everything is completely still intact, but today's lesson was just to teach you guys about how functions work and what they are, and how you can use them. Based off of your judgment, you can decide when and if you want to use a function, and where to call it. And so, using everything we've learned from our lesson today, I hope you guys can add a new cool feature to your Scratch game, and I look forward to seeing what you guys can create. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in next week's video. Have a good day.